I'm still not done with The Simpsons. Even though my last Simpsons video was kind of an unsatisfactory mess, I wasn't about to give up on my single episode reviews. With that being said, today, or whenever this video is clicked, which may not be today, I want to review the Season 4 episode, Marge Gets a Job. This is probably my favorite Marge episode, tied maybe with Fear of Flying. There are two types of good Simpsons episodes. Good, I don't mind sitting through it on a binge, and good, the binge started because I was in the mood to watch this episode. Marge Gets a Job is the second one. Marge Gets a Job keeps a good pace with the humor and the story, and it keeps you laughing, but it never seems to stall the plot from moving forward. Forward momentum is one of the most important things in any piece of media, but especially in a 22-minute program, you can't afford to drag in the middle with such a short runtime. Like, the retirement party scene in the first half is probably my all-time favorite Mr. Burns moment. It's a retirement party for an old guy who really doesn't want to retire, and it's really depressing.
Please don't make me retire. My job is the only thing that keeps me alive. I never married and my dog is dead. I'm not finished!
Oh, yes, you are!
And it just gets hijacked by Mr. Burns, who makes it all about himself. Season 4 is peak Mr. Burns. On the Simpsons end of things, this is a financial crisis-driven episode, as many episodes were in the earlier years, but it has a relatively simple solution. With the new position at the plant opening up, Marge gets a job, hence the title of the episode. I'm shocked they never decided to give Marge a job earlier or even later to spice up the dynamic a bit, but I guess since she usually takes care of Maggie, they didn't want to have to write a whole thing to change that for whatever episode or to make it a recurring thing. Basically, the house's foundation is giving out and causing it to sink. This itself leads to some humorous moments, but the scene where Bart falls out the window is probably the best they got out of it. Everything from the bird landing and sinking the house, to just how Bart and Marge stand there looking at each other for a few seconds before it cuts to commercial. Like, I don't know why, it's funny as shit. Marge manages to get the job at the plant because Lisa, like, blatantly lied on Marge's resume, and really they don't go into exactly what she does at the plant. There's some humor behind her accidentally causing a fire, but the plot pivots from Marge working to Mr. Burns becoming smitten with her. Now, there is one inconsistency with this. Mr. Burns should know who Marge is. Yeah, that's one minor little detail that bothers me, and I know it shouldn't, but Mr. Burns should be well aware of who Marge is because the two characters have a history together. She both fucked up his campaign for governor and painted him in the nude. I know it's The Simpsons and continuity is more of a suggestion than something mandatory, but this is a prime example of the problems with a property that has a rotating staff of writers and showrunners. Of course, I love this episode, so I'm just going to assume that in the timeline, this episode takes place before those other ones. Kinda like how I look at E.I.E.I.D.O. and Grandpa vs. Sexual Inadequacy. Now, the whole thing with Burns attempting to court Marge is kind of an uncomfortable scenario. Burns clearly tries to use his position of power to woo Marge, as shown when Marge makes suggestions on how to raise morale in the plant, which is one of my favorite scenes in the episode. Burns is clearly just going along with it to impress Marge because he doesn't give a shit about the morale at the plant, and he usually disregards employees' suggestions.
Don't worry, there'll be plenty of apples for you.
Although on the funnier end of things, Marge's little suggestions do little to help morale. The funny hat day and the Tom Jones music do not cure clinical depression or psychotic mania. That's right, for any of you managers that, employ a bunch of people for shitty wages, your pizza days and your fun days don't really fucking make up for the fact that I'm struggling to fucking live. Like, stop. Instead of doing pizza day, give me a fucking raise. And Marge's suggestion to replace the donuts with healthy snacks is probably just taking away the one thing employees enjoy every day. Which, hey, why didn't the Angel of Death guy just get his gun?
I am the Angel of Death. The time of purification is at hand.
Burns has no business trying to woo an employee with his power, but that's not to say that Marge may have unintentionally given Mr. Burns the wrong idea. I'm not saying it's Marge's fault that any of this goes down the way that it does. She was clearly oblivious to Mr. Burns being infatuated with her, and it leads to miscommunications between the two when Burns has Smithers kidnap Tom Jones.
Pleasant dreams, Mr. Jones.
And Marge blurts out that she has a husband. Burns does not take this well at all and starts to think that Marge blatantly took advantage of him being old and infatuated. Which isn't the case, she was completely oblivious to his advances and thought he was just being nice. In anger, Mr. Burns fires her, which leads to Mr. Burns making a pretty crass comment at Marge.
You can't fire me just because I'm married. I'm going to sue the pants off you.
You don't have to sue me to get my pants off.
The climax is relatively straightforward and satisfying. Homer and Marge enlist Lionel Hutz, who lays out what he has on Burns, but then Burns just flexes his 10 high-priced lawyers.
Yes, well, I have 10 high-priced lawyers.
Seeing Lionel Hutz just freak the fuck out and bolt is certainly one of my top tier Lionel Hutz moments. In the end, Homer decides that he has to stand up for Marge, and Burns begins to empathize with Homer, and maybe he sees the error of his ways. It all ends on a high note with Homer and Marge at the private Tom Jones concert that Burns was planning. It's a nice touch having Tom Jones fucking chained up and trying to get Marge to help him. I think this episode does a really good job of taking Marge out of her element. It's a fresh take that would be sort of a go-to a few times throughout the series. On the one hand, we also kind of get to see Mr. Burns' human side. And while Mr. Burns is in the wrong for trying to use his position of power, who hasn't misinterpreted a signal from the opposite sex and had a little bit of a shit fit when they figured it out that it wasn't gonna happen? It happens. Some people take it better than others, but it can happen to anybody. On the other hand, who hasn't accidentally given signals to someone? Marge has been married for a long time. She hasn't been out playing the field for years, so she probably is just not used to getting any sort of flirtation coming her way. The episode is very relatable from both ends. Of course, sexual harassment is wrong, but honestly, Burns doesn't do anything really too out of line until he fires Marge. I guess they couldn't really go much farther than his line about taking his pants off, because, yeah, I think if they had Burns corner Marge in an office and start telling her to suck it, they would have killed Mr. Burns' likability and probably offended people. It's a cartoonish episode from one of the most cartoonish seasons, but it is relatable in its subject matter. Humor-wise, this is a fucking hilarious episode. Funnier than it has any right to be, given it's a mostly plot-driven episode. I didn't even get into my absolute favorite Smithers moment of all time, so midway through the episode, Burns moves Marge into Smithers' office, which, that's kind of weird looking back, but moving on, Smithers ends up doing menial work around the plant, including cleaning toilets. I can't even do this justice, I'm just gonna show the clip.
Springtime fresh, winter white. What could be better?
Oh man, I really got it. No!
So this is a scene that, like, on the right day, if I haven't seen it in a while, can actually put me into a state of laughter where I cannot stop laughing and I can't breathe. It's just like, there's jerk-ass Homer, but then there's stupid, obnoxious prick Homer, which is present in seasons 4 to 5. Like, he specifically chose the one fucking urinal that was right in Smithers' face, and he just fucking whipped his cock out and started pissing right next to Smithers' head. Like, I picture a faint but noticeable little mist of backsplash urine hitting Smithers in the face, and that's why he screamed. This is one of my all-time favorite scenes in the show's entire run. I will cherish this until the day I fucking die. Like, me and my friends fucking quote this. When I was like 13, 14, me and my buddy were watching it, and we like rewound this scene like 7 times, and oh my god. And I feel before I go, I should talk about the B-plot, because I kind of left it out in the first part. It's just as strong as the main plot, in a way. Basically, with Marge occupied with work, Bart starts to play hooky from school by pretending to be sick to get out of tests, knowing full well that Grandpa won't be as assertive about it as Marge. I absolutely love how he returns claiming to be all better, and then Krabappel tells him that he has to take the test now, and he busts out this gem.
Oh, my ovaries.
The key to a solid B-plot in any show, but especially The Simpsons, is that the B-plot does not overtake the importance of the main plot, which this does not do. It's a play on The Boy Who Cried Wolf, which Grandpa even references.
Have you ever read The Boy Who Cried Wolf?
I glanced at it. Boy Cries Wolf has a few laughs. I forget how it ends.
But of course, being The Simpsons in its 4th season, Bart is finally put in a position where he has to do the test, and after a chaotic day on set of the Krusty the Clown show...
Loud! That's our secret word for the day!
An actual-ass wolf finds its way into Springfield Elementary and mauls Bart. It's a fun little B-plot that gives a break from the main plot, but does not overshadow or overtake it. And of course, you know, groundskeeper Willie manages to save the day without getting an axe in the spine, and Bart gets to miss the test, but is traumatized afterwards. It's also funny because he claimed he had rabies, and he may very well be at risk for rabies after the wolf attack, which, fun fact, in the original broadcast, Bart said that he had Tourette's instead of rabies, rabies, but they changed it because it might be offensive. Actually, somebody threatened to sue over it. I can't find the original anywhere, but according to the wiki, that's what it was. I think there's like one DVD release overseas that has it, and certain international syndication markets still have it, but over in North America, it's no bueno. All in all, I think Marge Gets a Job is a fucking hidden gem that, besides the classic Smithers dream sequence, I rarely see referenced by anybody. I know Real Jims did a 60-second Simpsons review of it, but I was actually very disappointed to see that he didn't do an extra seconds on it. On the surface, it's a standard Mr. Burns episode featuring Marge, but at its core, it's a much deeper episode. There's a lot of meat to this episode, and I think it's just a tiny bit underappreciated. If I was to grade this episode, fuck it. I'm gonna give it a full-on 9 out of 10, because it's almost the total package. Humor, check. Strong plot, check. Non-distracting but entertaining B-plot, check. Forward momentum, check. The only thing it has going against it is the opener is a little bit of a slow start. It has its moments of humor, but the episode doesn't really kick into the next gear until the retirement party. That being said, it's not enough to affect the episode drastically. The foundation repair gag and Homer trying to do the repair himself is pretty fucking funny. They close it off pretty well too when they finally pay the guy and he tries to tell them that all they needed was a washer cap. Enraging Homer, which culminates in this gem of a line.
Look, I got some washers in my truck. I'll give you one.
Marge, get my gun.
But once we get Marge into the power plant, the episode is full speed ahead. Very consistent episode, almost flawless in its execution, certainly a shoo-in for my favorite Marge episode, and possible contender for a top 20 or even top 10 list overall. What are your thoughts on Marge Gets a Job? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see my channel grow, hit that like button. Not to be a begging little like slut on YouTube, but it does help my engagement when you do that. Until then, here's a clip from the episode.
Oral thermometer my eye. Think warm thoughts, boy, 'cause this is mighty cold.
There is a man.
There is a man.
A certain man.
A certain man.
A man whose grace and handsome face are known across the land. You know his name.
You know his name.
It's Mr. Burns.
It's Mr. Burns.
He loves a smoke, enjoys a joke. Why, he's worth 10 times what he earns.
He's Mr. Burns.
I'm Mr. Burns.
He's Monty Burns.
Mr. Burns.
To friends he's known as Monty, but to you it's Mr. Burns.
Burns.
Last chance. Oh, yeah.